Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen of alphas, the ones who were told no, the ones who were mocked, the ones whose silence was mistaken for weakness and whose fire was mistaken for madness. Welcome back to the cold truth, to the edge of reality where pain sharpens the blade and disbelief becomes your fuel. You're not here by accident. You're not alive in this moment because the universe just rolled dice and your face happened to show up. Number. You're here because you clawed through the mud while others begged for mercy. You walked while your knees bled. You stood when your soul screamed to collapse. And yet, even now, people still can't believe this shh. How the hell did you know? They look at you like a glitch in the Matrix, like a ghost they swore they buried years ago. They can't wrap their heads around it because they remember the version of you that doubted, that failed, that bled out dreams onto concrete floors and never got up right away. They remember your silent exits and your quiet breakdowns, but they never saw what happened after you disappeared. They never saw what you did in the dark, because while they laughed, you studied. While they slept, you trained. While they mocked, you built. You didn't cry for attention, you bled in silence. And now they want to know your secret. But secrets aren't given, they're earned. You see, most people never make it because they can't stand not being seen. They need applause before they earn it. They want results without suffering. They want destiny without death. But you walked through your own personal hell. You didn't just taste failure, you drank it like whiskey, bitter and burning, and then asked for another round. You knew. You always knew. Somewhere deep in the marrow of your bones, there was a scream no one could hear. A storm that told you you are not done. A voice that whispered through clenched teeth, there's more in you. Don't you dare stop here. And now the world looks confused. They ask, how the hell did you know? You knew because you saw what they couldn't. You stared long enough into the abyss and smiled when it blinked. You studied your own demons, not to escape them, but to own them. You wore your trauma like armor and your regret like a map. Every scar became a direction, every failure a compass. You weren't looking for shortcuts. You weren't waiting for signs. You built your own damn path with your bare hands and the bones of your past. And it hurt. God, it hurt. But pain was always your language. Pain was your prophet. Pain told you where to go when comfort lied. And now that you've risen, now that you've shattered expectations, they want to know. How the hell did you know? You knew because you stopped asking for permission. You knew because you realized nobody was coming to save you. That the cavalry doesn't exist. That no mentor, no parent, no friend, no divine miracle would hand you a sword. You had to forge it in your own fire. You had to turn every rejection into steel. You had to become the kind of beast that doesn't wait at the gate. It rips the damn gate off its hinges. And now you walk like a ghost that can't be touched. A legend they whisper about but can't quite define. Because what you became, it's not normal. It's not comfortable. It's not easy to digest. It threatens them. It exposes their mediocrity. That's why they say they can't believe this shit. But let me tell you something darker. They chose not to believe. Because belief carries responsibility. If they believe in you, they'd have to confront their own laziness, their own lies, their own mirrors. So it's easier to dismiss you as lucky or crazy or obsessed. Let them. Let them try to reduce what they could never survive, because they didn't see what it cost. They didn't see the nights you screamed into your own pillow, the days you walked through betrayal like a living corpse, the hours you whispered to yourself, just breathe, just one more step. They didn't see the loss, the sacrifice. the friendships that rotted, the innocence you buried. But you saw, you felt every second of it, and that's how you knew. You knew because life doesn't reward the passive. Life bows to the one who demands it to. You knew that time was your enemy, that comfort was a coffin, that safety was just a slower death. You knew that your only salvation was discipline, brutal, savage, relentless discipline. Not the kind that's cued for social media, but the kind that makes you puke in silence and still show up the next day. The kind that nobody applauds, the kind that turns you into a monster they can't control. And still, with all that, they're shocked. They still ask, how the hell did you know? You knew because your pain had a purpose, because you refused to die ordinary. You refused to be a carbon copy of a broken society, numbed by dopamine and excuses. You chose war every single day. You chose hunger. You chose loneliness. You chose the path of most resistance. Not because you're masochistic, but because greatness only comes that way. You don't stumble into power. You earn it. You take it. You bleed for it. You get crucified by your own doubts and still rise with your fists clenched. And now they call you lucky? No, my friend. This wasn't luck. This was prophecy. This was inevitability. And now they sit at their desks, mouths open, whispering, people still can't believe this shh. How the hell did they know? They don't get it. They'll never get it. Because they're still asking questions you already buried. They're still stuck on level 1 while you're rewriting the damn game. They look for signs while you become one. They want a shortcut while you turned pain into your GPS. They still hope. You decided. That's the difference. They wonder. You knew. And the truth is, they don't deserve your secret. Not yet, because they haven't earned the language you speak, the language of sacrifice, of silence, of scars. They want your results, but not your scars. They want your glory, but not your crucifixion. So let them doubt. Let them stay blind. You didn't rise for them. You didn't rise to be understood. You rose because staying down meant death. You rose because your soul demanded it, and that's something no one can teach. No book, no guru, no seminar, just fire, just fury, just blood. And so, if they ask again, how the hell did you know? Look them dead in the eye and say, I didn't need to know. I just refused to die before I became what I saw in my nightmares. That's all. That's everything. And still, the echoes follow you. Footsteps in empty hallways, voices in dark corners whispering like ghosts. How did you do it? But what they'll never understand is that this wasn't about motivation. This was obsession. This was madness turned method. This was a furnace you willingly stepped into and let it burn everything soft out of you. You didn't wait to be chosen. You chose yourself. Every goddamn day. Even when you hated the process. Even when nothing made sense. Even when you stood alone, eyes hollow from sleepless nights, spine trembling from the weight of all the versions of you that died in the making of this one. There were no applause breaks, no cinematic background music, just sweat, just silence, just you, staring at the ceiling in the middle of the night, asking the universe to just give you one reason to keep going. And it never answered. It never had to. Because the reason was always you. That's what they don't get. You were the storm. You were the villain and the hero in your own story. You were the one who had to cut off the hand that fed you lies. You were the one who walked barefoot through broken glass, just to prove you still had feeling left in your soul. They don't see that. They see the result. They see the roar, but not the silence that bred it. They see the crown, but not the crucifixion. They see the lion, but never the cage it broke out of. And they stand there, mouths twisted in disbelief, asking again, how the hell did you know? You didn't have a map. You had pain. You didn't have mentors. You had mistakes. You didn't have a fan base. You had voices in your head telling you you're not enough, and you faced them. You didn't run. You sat in that madness, learned its name, and bent it to your will. You took your weaknesses and weaponized them. You weren't born with this. You bled for it. You suffered for it. You sacrificed for it. You buried the person you used to be and built a monster in their place. Not out of hate, but out of necessity. Because in a world where everyone's trying to be liked, you chose to be feared. While they sought validation, you sought victory. While they begged for mercy, you built muscle. And not just the kind that shows on your body, the kind that's carved into your mind, your habits, your soul. The kind that doesn't break when the world collapses. The kind that keeps moving when everything else stops. The kind that doesn't give a damn about odds, or critics, or applause. You chose to disappear not to hide, but to transform. You knew that real change doesn't happen in the spotlight. It happens in the shadows, when no one is watching, when the only witness to your grind is your own guilt, your own anger, your own hunger. You walked through that darkness alone, and every step was a funeral for the coward you used to be. And now they want your blueprint. They want your 10 steps to success. But what are you going to tell them? That you died 1,000 deaths to become this? That the road was paved with your own blood? That you had to give up your peace just to build your power? They wouldn't survive your truth. That's why you don't owe them an explanation. Let them keep asking. Let them marvel from the sidelines. Let them turn you into a myth, because only legends make people uncomfortable like this. Only monsters built in pain walk with that kind of silence. They feel it, even if they don't understand it. That's why they stare. That's why they whisper. Because deep down they know they would have quit where you kept going. That's the part that makes them sick. The part where they realize they had the same hours, the same days, the same chances, but they spent theirs begging for signs while you spent yours sharpening your teeth. And now they pretend it's unbelievable. They pretend it's a miracle, because it's easier than admitting they could have, but didn't. You want to know the darkest truth of all? Most people want to be average, not because they love it, but because it's safe, because it's silent, because it never demands the soul. But you weren't built for that. You were born allergic to comfort. You couldn't breathe in the shallow waters of conformity. You wanted the deep end. You wanted the kind of life that breaks bones and reassembles them into weapons. You wanted the kind of destiny that burns the past behind you so thoroughly that even your shadow can't go back. And so, when they ask again, eyes wide and hearts small, how the hell did you know? You smile, not because you enjoy the disbelief, but because you earned it. Because there's a kind of satisfaction that only comes when your scars prove you right. Because there's a kind of vengeance that only the patient ever taste. Because silence wasn't your punishment, it was your classroom. And now your noise is thunder. People don't understand warriors. Not really. They think you're arrogant. They think you're cold. But what they don't realize is that you had to kill every soft part of yourself to survive. You had to shut off emotion just to keep moving. You had to bury love, hope, doubt, all of it, just to breathe in a world that tried to drown you. You don't show pain anymore, not because you don't feel it, but because you learned long ago that weakness invites wolves, and you're not here to be prey. You're the goddamn storm. Let them stay confused. Let them scratch their heads and ask the same question again and again. How the hell did you know? You didn't. But you decided anyway. You acted anyway. You suffered anyway. You walked through fire anyway. Because you knew that not acting was a different kind of death. One that kills from the inside out. One that leaves you breathing, but broken. Smiling, but hollow. Living, but buried. That's the fate you escaped. That's the death you rejected. And now, with the world watching, with the same people who laughed now clapping, you remain calm. Why? Because this was always supposed to happen. Not for them, not for likes, but because you swore to yourself in the darkest hour of your life that you would never go back, that the next time they saw you, they wouldn't recognize you, that the next time your name was spoken, it would taste like power. And here you are, prophecy fulfilled, storm delivered. They still want the answer, even now, even after everything. They circle around you like vultures, trying to pick the pieces off your legacy before it's even cooled. They want to break it down into digestible steps, a process, a formula, something clean, something marketable. But you know the truth. You can't put war into a worksheet. You can't package pain. You can't sell the sound your soul made when it was breaking under pressure, whispering one last time, "Don't quit yet." They want to copy your result, but they refuse to walk your road. They want to wear the crown, but they won't touch the thorns. So again, they ask, how the hell did you know? But knowledge was never the source. It was instinct. It was defiance. It was rebellion stitched into your DNA. You weren't made in comfort. You were made in chaos. While they waited for conditions to be perfect, you built in the storm. While they needed a guarantee, you bet your life. While they stood still, analyzing risk, you jumped into the fire and molded yourself in real time. You didn't need to know. You just needed to become. Because becoming was the only answer you ever really needed. You know what separates you from them? You didn't stop at broken. You didn't pause at heartbreak. You didn't settle after the first setback, or the 10th, or the 100th. You didn't make excuses. You made progress, inch by inch, hour by hour, year after brutal year. You were willing to look like a fool. You were willing to be misunderstood. You were willing to lose everything that didn't serve your vision, even if it left you standing alone in an empty room, because you knew that anything built on fear is temporary. And you weren't here to build something temporary. You were here to build a legend. That's what they feel now, the weight of it, the immovable presence of someone who refused to die quietly. That's why their eyes avoid yours. That's why their words tremble around you. Because you've become something they can't define. Not a person, not a brand, a force, a walking, breathing monument to everything they tried to suppress. You're not just surviving anymore. You're conquering, and it scares the hell out of them. They'll try to diminish it, to label it, to dismiss you as arrogant, toxic, obsessed, extreme. Let them. That's how mediocrity defends itself, by making excellence look insane. But deep down, they know. They know. That's why they watch in silence. That's why they talk when you leave. That's why they keep bringing your name up in rooms you've never stepped into. Because you've become a storm they can't escape. And here's the final truth, the one they'll never say out loud. They envy you. Not your results, not your victories, but your will. Your ability to keep going when everything in your life screams stop. They envy the fire in your eyes, the way you wake up without needing applause, the way you move like you were chosen, even when no one else believed in you. They envy your power, because somewhere deep inside, they know they had the same opportunity, and they let it rot. That's why they can't believe this shit. Because you didn't just win. You became the proof that they never had to lose. You became the evidence that their story could have been different, and that's the heaviest truth of all. That's the burden you now carry. Not just your own pain, but theirs. The unspoken regret in their eyes when they look at you and realize what they could have been. But they chose comfort, and you chose war. And here you are, standing tall while others crumble, breathing fire while they gasp for air. The very sight of you disrupts comfort, challenges reality, threatens every excuse they've ever told themselves. You are no longer a person to them. You are a symbol, a walking, breathing contradiction to every lie they swallowed to stay weak. That's why they whisper. That's why they stare. That's why they still say, "People can't believe this shh." How the hell did you know? Because your very existence exposes their cowardice. Your presence drags their potential into the light and forces them to see what could have been. And that truth, it's too heavy for most. But you don't flinch. You don't shrink. You don't apologize for making it out of a place that was designed to break you. You wear the weight like armor. You own the fear like currency. You understand something they never will. Greatness is a decision, not a gift, not a stroke of luck, not something handed down by fate. It's earned in the trench, in the pit, in the silence. It's earned when no one believes in you, when nothing makes sense, and when every part of your soul screams to stop, and you don't. They want to dissect you, break down your steps, turn you into a formula, but they'll fail because you're not a strategy, you're not a course, you're not a 10-step hack on a YouTube channel. You're what happens when nothing is left but raw will, when everything else has been stripped away. Privilege, safety, applause, approval. And what remains is pure, unfiltered, nuclear grit. That's the kind of power no school teaches. That's the kind of weapon no one sees coming. And that's why they still can't explain you. They saw you fall and assumed that was your ending. But the thing about people like you is, falling isn't the end, it's the ignition. You didn't just get back up. You rose differently, changed, sharper, colder, more precise, and that confused them. Because they expect failure to define you. They expect pain to silence you. But you took every hit and carved it into your bones. You turned it into motion. You turned it into fuel. You turned it into prophecy. And now, every time they speak your name, they speak it with fear, or awe, or confusion. Because they know you shouldn't be here. By every statistic, every rule, every societal expectation, you should have disappeared. But instead, you became the nightmare they never saw coming. And that terrifies them, because if you made it, what does that say about them? That's why they reject the truth. That's why they still pretend this isn't real. Because the real truth is too painful. They had the same fire. They just refused to let it burn. You didn't wait for the right time. You became the right time. You didn't wait for someone to open a door. You kicked the damn wall down. You didn't wait for luck. You made the ground shake until the universe had no choice but to look your way. And that's what separates you. You moved without knowing the outcome. You acted when everything screamed to stop. You chose purpose over peace, fire over comfort, evolution over fitting in. And now, as they watch you walk by, changed, whole, unrecognizable, they mumble those same words, that same old chant. People still can't believe this How the hell did you know? But what they don't understand is that knowing was never the point. You weren't after certainty, you were after freedom. And freedom costs. It costs everything. Sleep, friends, sanity, sometimes even love, and you paid, willingly, because living half dead under someone else's rules wasn't an option, because watching your own potential rot in front of you wasn't acceptable, because mediocrity isn't just boring, it's betrayal. A betrayal of everything you could have been, everything you should have been, and you weren't willing to die guilty. So you built yourself, not in front of crowds, not in the public eye, but behind closed doors, in private wars, in quiet hells, when no one was watching, when the only sound was your own heartbeat, your own breath, your own inner scream. Keep going. Keep ficking going. And you did, even when it didn't make sense, even when your body broke and your mind fractured and your soul felt like ash. You kept going, and now you walk like war in human form, silent, powerful, unapologetic, and still, they ask. Still they can't comprehend. Still they look at you and say, how did you know? You want to tell them the truth? You didn't. You just refused to quit. You just refused to die like the rest of them. You just refused to let the pain win. That's it. That's all. That's everything. You see, people don't need more motivation. They need a mirror. They need to look into their own eyes and own the fact that they've been playing small, that they've been lying to themselves, that the version of life they complain about is the one they chose. That truth is brutal, but it's also freeing, because the moment you accept it, you become unstoppable. You take the leash off your own potential, become a creature they can't control. That's what you did. That's what you are. Not a person, a force, not a fluke, a reckoning, not a miracle, a reminder of what happens when you stop asking and start acting, when you stop begging and start building, when you stop dreaming and become the thing others only fantasize about. So let the world wonder, let them keep asking the question. They're too afraid to answer for themselves. People still can't believe this, Shetty. How the hell did you know? Let it echo. Let it haunt them, because the answer will always be the same. You didn't know. You decided. You bled. You rose. And you never stopped. That's why you're here. That's why they fear you. That's why they whisper your name like it's legend. Because you did what they wouldn't. Because you became what they couldn't. Because you are what they never will be.